1796, Russia, St. Petersburg. In the distance, on the other bank of the river, you can see a heavy prison. For 2 years, TADEUSZ KOSCIUSZKO has been imprisoned here. TADEUSZ KOSCIUSZKO, hero of Poland and hero of America, Brigadier General of the US Army. He was captured after the battle in Poland near Niemcewicz, fighting for the independence of his homeland. In 1796, Empress Catherine II died and Paul I ascended to the throne of the Tsars. The new Tsar decided to grant freedom to the great leader TADEUSZ KOSCIUSZKO. Kościuszko also negotiated the release of many thousands of Polish prisoners, his soldiers. Our film begins at the moment when TADEUSZ KOSCIUSZKO sets off back to the US.
But then when the agreement was made and 12,000 Polish prisoners were released, he could leave Petersburg, and then he went landway through Finland and Sweden up back to America. So
Russia-Sweden border. TADEUSZ KOSCIUSZKO sets off back to the US. In August 2024, we followed the route taken by TADEUSZ KOSCIUSZKO to get to Sweden and then to America. Imagine the snow and frost of 1796, and remember that Kościuszko was severely wounded in the battle. During the journey, he was unable to walk, paralyzed from the waist down. Whenever he needed to go somewhere, his servant carried him in his arms. The Marble Palace, St. Petersburg. This is where TADEUSZ KOSCIUSZKO's voyage to America begins. On the December 19th, he crossed this bridge to the north.
with him at that time was also a Polish writer.
Julian Ursyn Niemcewicz, writer Kościuszko's adjutant.
From the memoirs of Julian Ursyn Niemcewicz. It is something awful to travel in December at 61 degrees latitude. You get up at 4 in the morning, put on a dress, and fur on a fur. You become a huge, heavy block. They tell you to pack yourself into a vehicle. You can barely catch your breath. Your freezing breath sticks your fur to your face. You've driven half a mile and a vehicle stops. Why? The road is covered in 8 feet of snow. You can't go any further.
Za moimi plecami płynie graniczna rzeka Kemeniarwe, na której kończyło się Imperium Rosyjskie. Przez tę rzekę w końcu grudnia przejechał Tadeusz Kościuszko, ostatecznie porzucając terytorium rosyjskie.
With what emotion we saw ourselves on the Swedish soil. I have escaped your clutches, Russia, the cause of all the misfortunes of my fatherland and country, where for 26 months I groaned in the most horrible prison, from which I would never have emerged if death had not torn the scepter from the hands of the Tsarina to transfer it to the charitable hands of Tsar Paul I.
Wyobraźmy sobie, że jest zima, wkoło pełno śniegu, wieje wiatr, temperatura minus 26 stopni. Nadjeżdża Kościuszko, zawinięty w futra, osłonięty dywanem od wiatru. Całość ciągnie 11 koni.
Russia-Sweden border. Porvu.
Tadeusz Kościuszko był niezwykłym człowiekiem. Z wykształcenia inżynierem, artylerzystą, fortyfikatorem. Uczył się w szkole rycerskiej w Warszawie, a później pogłębiał wiedzę wojskową w czasie studiów we Francji. tą swoją wiedzę wykorzystał w czasie wojny o niepodległość Stanów Zjednoczonych, gdzie został przyjęty jako inżynier, gdzie zrobiono mu egzamin, który zdał i był budowniczym fortyfikacji. Zbudował największą twierdzę, niezdobytą twierdzę w Ameryce, West Point.
I think that Tadeusz Kościuszko, he's such an enormous, interesting personality, because he was not only a military person, but also a very human person. And also, he's one of the first who wanted to separate state from church, which was very advanced in a Catholic country, but he was not very Catholic himself. And he was 100% fighter for Polish rights and freedom. In many ways, he was about 200 years ahead of his time. He was for women's rights. He wanted to include the women in society. He was against all sort of racism. He wanted to liberate more or less the Jewish people also. Thanks to him, the first Jewish brigade was arranged. He was also the first who was really for animals' rights, which was very unusual, even up to our days.
Przyjechaliśmy do Borgo, które obecnie nazywa się Porvoo, i jest to miejsce, przez które przejeżdżał Tadeusz Kościuszko. Od razu odwiedzili go miejscowi notable, prezydent miasta, profesorowie tutejszego uniwersytetu, jak i gimnazjum. Oberżysta zdarł z nich niemiłosiernie $5.
Russian Finland and its peasants experienced a much better treatment than other parts of the Russian Empire. Peter I, having taken possession of this province, preserved for the inhabitants their privileges and ancient rights, and his successors maintained them untouched. Even the peasants were freed from the conscript. Despite these attempts, the breath of despotism largely destroyed this movement and this industry, which can be observed in Swedish Finland.
Budynek najstarszego gimnazjum w Porvoo istnieje do tej pory. W tym budynku również zebrał się Sejm fiński, który w 1809 roku uchwalił przyłączenie Wielkiego Księstwa Finlandii do Imperium Rosyjskiego.
Helsinki.
We had 26 degrees of cold that day. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we arrived at Helsingfors, or Helsinki. This city, with its fortress nearby, is considered the bulwark of Swedish Finland. The artillery regiment is garrisoned there.
Kościuszko po przybyciu do Helsinek, które w owym czasie nazywały się Helsingforsem, został przyjęty przez tutejszego dowódcę artylerii i zaproszony na obiad. Obiad tutejszym zwyczajem przeciągnął się do późnego wieczoru.
January 1st, 1797. Our journey to Obo, today Turku, lasted 3 days. The country through which we traveled was varied and picturesque. Everywhere there were fir and large forests, rocks and precipices, and in them, despite the severity of the winter season, the roar of the falling streams.
The city of Turku arose spontaneously at the crossroads of trade routes and looked different during Kosciuszko's time. Benito Casagrande is an architect and owner of the house where Tadeusz Kościuszko stayed for 5 days.
The cross was the place where the town has born itself. Not founded, born like Rome. Look, we are just in this corner. The bridge was straight. There was the first bridge over the Aura River, which was destroyed during the Great Fire.
Understand.
And then it changed the place because new architect made a new design for the city because everything, almost everything was ruined, except this house, our house, because it was stone. It didn't burn. The memory of Kościuszko is still there. Okay, and the first hotel restaurant in Finland, this house. That's why Tadeusz Kościuszko has also visited this house, because it was hotel restaurant. Follow me.
Tadeusz Kościuszko, varsin erityislaatuinen tilaisuus järjestettiin 6. tammikuuta 1797, jolloin juhlittiin Venäjältä Tukholman matkalla ollutta Puolan, Valko-Venäjän ja Yhdysvaltojen kansalaissankaria generaali Tadeusz Kościuszkoa. Mając 49 lat, Kościuszko przyjechał do Turku 3 stycznia 1797 roku. I tu już go znali jako bohatera, dlatego zorganizowano dla niego święta czy jedzenie po to, aby potwierdzić jego wielkość. I to się działo w Sejpelin sali, czyli tutaj, w tej sali, w której teraz jesteśmy.
Baron Fabian Reed is the governor of the city of Obo. He came immediately to visit the general. We stayed 5 days in this city. The mayor, Mr. Simmenberg, took great care of us and tried to make our stay pleasant. He therefore gathered music lovers and gave us very nice concerts.
The reputation of Kościuszko was very, very large among students and intellectuals in Sweden and Finland. He came like a rock star, and he was a living hero. They hadn't seen so many really living heroes. So when he came to Åbo, Turku, he was met by hundreds of students. They sung for him and they had poems. And one of the most famous writers in the time, Franz Michael Franzén, he was the chief editor of the newspaper in Åbo. He became later a bishop and a member of the Swedish Academy. So he wrote long poems about him.
Kiedy już następnego dnia ci wszyscy zorientowali się, jaki on to jest porządny chłop, nie ma tutaj dosłownie, ale w tym sensie, zorganizowano właśnie orkiestrę, która grała i śpiewała po francusku. Studenci nieśli Kościuszko cały czas na noszach, ponieważ był tak osłabiony przez więzienie. Studenci przede wszystkim śpiewali mu, nawet kiedy już Kościuszko tutaj był w tej sali na noclegu pod oknami na dworze, pomimo że to było wtedy zima i minus 25 stopni.
January 11th. At 6 in the morning, each of us got into an open sleigh, except for the general, to whose sleigh a carpet in the shape of a canopy was attached, which well protected him.
Eckerö, Åland Islands.
We were to spend the whole day on the road on the frozen sea. The mild air, which had been lasting for several days, had weakened the ice very much. The peasants knew well the strength and thickness of the ice. They stopped us every now and then, often at the blow of the pole. Water from under the ice would gush out as if from a fountain. Once the general's cook ran up to me in terror, shouting, "Oh, sir, the ice is no thicker than a cutlet."
This is a report from the island of Eckerö in Åland from the 14th of January 1797. And they write like this. Since our last report, travelers going with the mail can go on their stock. Because of the wind is very from the north with coldness and very much of snow. That's why they are stuck there. Polish General Kosciuszko is for this reason also stuck there in Eckerö.
When we arrived at Eckerö, unfortunately we found that as far as the eye could see, the sea was covered with pieces of ice, huge floes. The wind was changeable, and therefore there was no hope of a quick departure. We spent, or rather dragged out, 11 days on this lonely island. In winter, when all nature froze, when one had only 5 hours of daylight. In the morning, around 7 we got up. Fires were kindled, candles were lit, and breakfast was prepared. At 8, the officers gathered. We drank coffee, tea with toast spread with excellent butter. The cook came in and dinner was ordered. Around 10, if the weather was fine, the peasants came with fish, white hares, black grouse, hazel goose, and sometimes poultry. They sell all this for quite a high price.
There was a post route, a connection between Eckerö and Stockholm, or this was part of a longer post route along the Finnish coast. But especially the part between Eckerö and Stockholm was very dangerous because the post and mail had to be delivered despite or in spite of the weather, so the conditions could be quite bad. And many died during the voyage, and there is a monument for those who perished.
On January 22nd, at 8 in the morning, Carpin suddenly rushed into us, advising us to pack quickly and be ready to sail. In an hour, we were ready. The general got into the sledge, our bags, the kitchen was accommodated, and 3 others. Scrambling over the rocks, we reached the shore, where our lifeboat awaited us. We got in, and here the most difficult work began. We had to break the ice that surrounded us, and to break it only with our ship. 15 peasants standing on the ice held ropes tied to the mast, fore and aft of the lifeboat, and pulling them moved the ship. Day was already falling when we approached the liquid abysses. The peasants returned home, and we, with a fairly favorable wind, began to sail. The wind was dying. We had to drop anchor in the Single Cars harbor. It is a small island, a bare and barren rock. There were 2 houses here. The landlady had prepared supper. The following morning brought wind and rain. We set off at 9. The wind was strong, the sea rough. But the most frightening thing were the huge blocks of ice which the sea pushed towards our lifeboat and which we had difficulty avoiding.
The Stockholm Gazette of January 27, 1797 reports on a telegraph from January 24 from Grisenholm. General Kosciuszko is arriving.
Finally, we got to the open sea. At 3 o'clock, we saw the telegraph tower in Grisenholm. The wind had dropped. The waves had calmed down. We had only the ice to fight. And at 5, we arrived at Grisenholm, tired and soaked to the skin.
Stockholm.
Za moimi plecami, pod numerem 11 na ulicy Regeringsgatan, znajdowała się oberża francuskiego oberżysty Robino. I właśnie tu zatrzymał się Tadeusz Kościuszko podczas swojego kilkudniowego pobytu w Sztokholmie. Andrzej Tadeusz Bonaventura Kościuszko, Herburoch III, bohater 7 narodów. Bohater Białorusi, ponieważ na niej się urodził i z szlachty białoruskiej się wywodził. Bohater Litwy, ponieważ uważał się za obywatela i szlachcica litewskiego. Bohater Polski, ponieważ był naczelnikiem państwa i wodzem naczelnym armii powstańczej. Wreszcie bohater Ukrainy, za którą walczył w wojnie 1792 roku pod Boruszkowcami, Zieleńcami i Dubienką. Był bohaterem Stanów Zjednoczonych Ameryki Północnej, Francji i Konfederacji Szwajcarskiej.
Tadeusz Kościuszko's journey from St. Petersburg to Stockholm, then to Gothenburg and by ship to England, and on to the US.
So he traveled through Sweden to Gothenburg, Göteborg, where he had to wait for a long time to get the right ship to take him over to the British Islands, to Plymouth. And then he went on traveling. He was a great freedom fighter, not only for the freedom of Polish people, but for all oppressed people in the world. He was fighting for freedom everywhere.